the phenomenon, the motorcyclist, and the book pimp, Kristen, next time.
Many people come to me asking how famous writers got their start. The phenomenon, J.K. Rowling. Did a little research on her. Very interesting rags to riches story. She started out as a single mom, working a couple of jobs, and just sitting at cafes writing this book that would not get out of her head about Harry somebody or other. She spent a lot of time devoted to this book and wrote mostly in cafes and went home and took care of her infant child who was left with her when she and her husband split up. So very difficult times. She was accused of writing in cafes because she had no heat in her home, which was not true. She just preferred the environment. And eventually she got turned down by 12 publishers. And instead of losing heart, she convinced an editor to let his 8-year-old daughter read the first chapter. His 8-year-old said, "Daddy, give me the next one now." And that was the beginning of her first book getting published. Now, this publisher did not want to take a risk. So they published 1,000 copies. Typical print run's going to be 10,000. So this was a very low risk for them because they did not believe in her. 1,000 copies. 500 of them were given to libraries, which tells you, okay, they didn't even sell those. So they only had 500 for sale, and it was up to her to sell them and prove herself, which of course we all know she did, and got contracts and went on to write 8 other books and even more in the future, movies, the whole 9 yards. Now we're moving on to another phenomenon known as The Shack. If you haven't read it, great book. It was a controversial book. It was turned down by secular publishers because it was too Christianese. It was turned down by Christian publishers because it was too edgy. So they decided, well, we want to publish it because our family told us it was great and they wanted to see it published, so we're going to self-publish. So they started Windblown Media. And the CEO, the partner who backed the funding of Windblown Media, maxed out 12 credit cards in order to pay for the editing, design, and the printing. Now, this quality of printing, you don't have to max out 12 credit cards for, but they did. They were left with a $300 marketing budget and 1 year of very little sales. Over the course of that year, word spread, word of mouth, typically takes 1 to 2 years, and now we see this book on bookstore shelves, in Sam's Club, in Walmart, in Target, just about anywhere you can go. This book is there, and Windblown Media has announced that they are going to publish a couple more authors' titles, and they've become a traditional publisher. All because other publishers said, we can't take the risk. Then we have The Motorcyclist. This is actually the sequel to his first book, A Shadowmancer. He wanted to publish his book so bad that he sold his motorcycle and paid for his first printing. Then he marketed it, sold it, and sold enough copies to pick up notice of another publisher, which I actually don't know the name of, G.P. Putnam and Sons, and they published 2 more books by him. So he was willing to do what it took to see his name in print. Then we have another slight phenomenon that was slightly short-lived, but it's still kind of in the fantasy genre with a lot of fantasy fiction fans out there, is Aragon. This is the DVD. The book was self-published through his family's press. So his family actually owned a publishing house and published it for him, which you could say that's self, you could say that's traditional, you could argue about it all day long. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't have to front up money. He was only 17 and very callow. He had his parents front the money for it. And then it started to sell, and his parents helped him market it, and it became this family adventure that took them to the traditional publishers, 3 more book deals, and a movie deal. Which, incidentally, the movie I think is better than the book. But don't tell anybody else that. And then, lastly, we move on to the book pimp.
Yes.
The reason I call him the book pimp, yes, I know what a pimp is. My husband asked me that last night. is because he was traditionally published with his first book. There are some blogs that say he self-published, and that is because he purchased his print run from his publisher. So in a sense, he was co-publishing. And that was because the publisher said, we think you're a flop, we don't think you're going to go anywhere, and we're not going to back this with any marketing, it's totally up to you. By the way, every single traditional publisher is going to say that about a newbie author nowadays. That's just what to say. But back then, it wasn't that common. So he said, well, to heck with you. I mean, we might not have said it that way, but that's how I'm saying it. I am going to purchase my books, and he got them at, I think, a 50% discount. So he could make a decent profit. I'm going to sit on the street corner out here with my trunk open and see what happens. And he sold out. Once he sold out, he took those numbers back and said, look, give me a deal for my next book. And I said, okay. And we now have multiple titles, and this is actually one of his more recent ones, John Grisham, The Book Pimp. So as you can see, there's many roads to becoming a successful author. There's rags to riches stories. There's stories of sacrifice. There's stories of family believing in you. There's stories of you believing in yourself so much that you're going to max out 12 credit cards. I personally have maxed out 10. I don't recommend it. Thankfully, most of them had low balances. However, if you figure the average credit card balance is $1,000, that's a lot of money to invest in your project. But I'd like to leave you with this one quote from the illustrious Coach Mac. Until you've paid your dues and proven yourself, like everyone else in life, nobody is really going to give you anything. Thank you.